traditionally becoming a manager or leader of people has been the way to get on.
There is something over here that I need to share with all of you because it's looking nasty.
Are there other people on the pitch that could actually give you a hand?
Because ultimately, if you're leading that team, you are the accountable one for overall performance.
Absolutely. Hello and welcome to the next episode of Beyond the Boardroom, the podcast with Kelly and Joe from Start Inspiring.
So today we're going to talk about the really difficult role of being a player manager. And we asked our audience, our community, what questions they might have around that topic. And we're going to try and answer some of those today and explore, what it really means to be a player manager and how can you best live and lead in that role.
Yeah. I think it leads us also into how do you know whether being a manager, being a leader is something you really want? Because I think certainly in my upbringing in an organisation, traditionally becoming a manager or leader of people has been the way to get on, the way to, earn more money. It's been the way to, I suppose, take those steps up. So, but actually it isn't really for everyone, is it?
No. I mean, we've probably had a number of leaders, in fact, even recently, that have said, I got here because I had ambitions to do this thing.
Yeah.
Probably didn't realise what this thing meant.
Yeah.
And actually, I don't want to do it. And how do I step away from that with my ego intact?
Yeah.
Do I have to leave the organisation that I'm in, which I actually love, to be able to do that? Or is there a way of me manoeuvring and finding my home? Yeah. Because I still, my old home probably isn't the right one either because I was getting a little bit bored or it wasn't stretching enough. So I needed something more. Yeah. But I've realised that that's not necessarily people management or leadership.
Yeah. Square pegs and square holes.
Yeah, absolutely. And we work with a lot of organisations that then either have the agility to, if the person's a really good person, try and find them a home. I think we've gone are the days where you have this rigid blueprint of an organisational structure and they were the only roles that you had. We've got organisations that need to move in many different ways today. And if you're creative, you can retain brilliant talent in non-people manager roles. Absolutely. And they can still develop as specialists.
I think all of that, what springs to mind for me is the beauty of those wonderful talent conversations that are happening in organisations where actually not only are you having that conversation more strategically, where do we see these colleagues in the future, who succeeds us, all of that type of thing, but also coupled with that wonderful kind of performance development conversation, which is where do you see yourself? Yeah. And do you see, and having a safe and good, strong connection and relationship means you can actually be saying to your manager, I love it here. I just don't know whether I'm on the right track. Yeah. I actually really love this stuff over here. How can I get more of that into my role? And that all becomes one big wonderful strategic conversation.
Absolutely.
Not that that's exactly what we're here to talk about today, but that's what comes to mind.
I did think you were going off on it. So if we start with, what do we mean by player manager?
Yeah, nice. It gives me football vibes.
Yep, go on. You're the one that loves football. Wrong shaped ball for me.
Well, I suppose football vibes it gives me is the coach running along up and down the sideline, maybe not shouting at their team, but certainly motivating, encouraging, feeding back, putting their heart and soul and their energy into the people that are making the magic happen. And I suppose in an organisation sense, the magic is where the customer touches the organisation, that kind of inflection moment where you deliver what it is you do. And the role of the coach in that is actually how do I help the people on the pitch be the best they can possibly be, pass the ball in the most effective way they can, and get the goal in the back of the net more often than not.
Yeah. And I guess in the organisational context, actually having some work to do myself.
Yeah.
So I am not only a coach as a player manager, I'm not only a senior leader who is the conductor, if you like. That's the other kind of analogy I would have, the conductor of the band and making sure the different parts are playing at the right time and in tune and all of that stuff. Actually, at times I've got to either be on the pitch or delivering pieces of work myself. So how do I find that balance between directing and leading the team and then doing myself, and making sure that probably I don't do too much of either. Especially in a scale-up environment. You know, a number of the leaders have grown with the organisation, and they do still need to roll their sleeves up and get their hands dirty and learn what they can delegate through people so that they can make sure that everything stays on track. without burning out, actually, because they're trying to do everything themselves.
No, I agree. And I think that means you have to know a lot about yourself and you have to know a lot about the team.
Absolutely.
As in, who's capable of what, how do I get the best from each of them, because they all want something different from you. I think that's probably one of the most difficult things about being a manager or a leader, is that need to situationally change how you deal with something, because it's actually not about your own preferences, is it? It's about the preferences of the people in your team. Whereas I think, go back kind of 10 or 15 years, it would have been much more about the preference of your manager, and you were towing the line in the team, right?
Yes.
Where actually you're seeing that kind of evolution piece.
Absolutely. And actually you're probably seeing people ask questions all the way up. So this question was actually from a CEO in a relatively large organisation. I'm just going to read it. So how to find the balance of holding team members accountable and remaining accountable and responsible ourselves. So how do I find that balance of collective responsibility or shared leadership? And I work as an exec coach with this individual leader, and I think she's done a brilliant job of letting go of all responsibilities as she's continued to grow and run the organisation. She has a brilliant exec team in place now, but there are still things that go wrong, and the natural temptation to go in and do it yourself. So the journey she's on, and is very open with the team, which is why I can share this, is I've now let go of stuff. I've now started to hold the team responsible, but when things go really wrong, like we're potentially going to lose a customer, or something in the supply chain's really, really difficult, and I believe that if I get involved, I can fix this. How do I find the balance of being the player and the manager? So, I mean, and you also coach a number of leaders. What advice would you give someone in that situ?
I think a lot of it comes down to the trust and relationship that you've built with your team, and almost that, and we'd use this kind of term in coaching too, but that kind of contracting with them about, this is your dance space, this is what I'm holding you to account for, this is what I'm expecting of you. I don't want to be stepping into that space. But actually there might be a time where I do need to step in. If I've had to step in, we'll wash it up later. But the reality is I've stepped in because I know it's going to need my input. I guess there's a conversation for the individuals to be saying, be honest with me about when you've reached your own level of capability, or you've run out of the tools in your toolbox. That is okay too. But come and talk to me, and I will be here and I'll support you, but I also need to make sure it doesn't completely fall over.
And I think that's a really important point, isn't it, is being very clear about the expected output, not particularly being controlling about how, but holding accountability. And so if we think about shared leadership and some of the coaching I do with leadership teams, we do talk about, no they, no blame, it's we. So there is this scenario, there is an individual that happens to look after that area on behalf of the business. They do have to wave the flag or ring a bell and say, okay, something's broken, so let my ego get out the room for a minute, we're all here in service of the customer. There is something over here that I need to share with all of you because it's looking nasty and we need to fix it. And so can we get in the room? CFO, this is what I need from you. CRO, this is what I need from you. You know, ops, this is how you can help. And have that person lead the conversation, but not necessarily take responsibility for all of the actions. But the way they behave, the way they respond, the importance that they put on the client and delivery, it is really important. And I guess, and if you're actually the CEO of the organisation, how are you checking in and making sure that the right things are happening, leaning in, giving advice when you can. And I think a lot of the conversations we have with individuals is delegation is not the same as abdication either. Absolutely not. So you may have delegated something, but you do have responsibility for checking in and making sure it's on track. And if it's not, you know, your leader might not understand the gravity of the situation. And so when you've got a helicopter view and you can see all of the parts and perhaps they can only see some of the parts, how do you lean in and help them? Which I think, you know, speaks so well to that kind of collective responsibility piece, doesn't it? Because as an exec team, you are collectively responsible for the good and safe running of an organisation. And if that's not working in one area, actually you are all responsible for that. Yes. And so are there other people on the pitch that could actually give you a hand? So starting to, rather than always go, I'm going to go to my manager and say, I've got this problem. Actually, there might be someone else in the team that could help you. Yes. And you're right, that's the point where you have to give your ego a talking to. Yes. To ask for help. And I need to ask for help, and that's okay. But if you've done some work as a team, so that kind of team coaching piece where you've really worked on your psychological safety as a team, how you trust one another, being authentic and vulnerable, actually those things are much easier to do. Because you do actually feel like a high-performing team. Absolutely. The other we've talked about before, I know, but the kind of pit stop, that kind of, you know, how can you just tiny improvements that take you from already being high performing to even more high performing. Yeah, absolutely. I do think though, so we say all of that and that is all true. There also comes a point where as that player manager, you need to decide whether you've got the right players on the pitch. Oh, for sure. You know, and some of the conversations we have with CEOs is, how many times do you want to watch the standards not being high enough, or the output not being the right put, or the decisions not being the right decisions before you take a decision and say, okay, I'm not sure I've got the right team or the right dynamics, or there is a player that isn't, you know, they may have been a really brilliant player all the way up until now, but in this team for this next part of the journey, they might not be the right player. And if that's true, I would say 99% of the time the individual knows they're probably not the right player too. Absolutely. And so having that honest thought, that conversation in an honest, thoughtful way, opening up that conversation, letting the individual discover with dignity other opportunities for them. Because ultimately, if you're leading that team, you are the accountable one for overall performance. Absolutely. It brings us really nicely back to what we were saying at the beginning, doesn't it, about that performance development conversation, that you're actually having a really genuine conversation with other human beings about their career aspirations, but also for you being really honest about where you see they could be, but where you don't see them. And you know, I think you're right. And I think it almost starts even before that, because if we think about the scale-ups that we work with, I think it's really, really early discussions about your career pathway. And I think we tend to think about it as being vertical. And if you think about a startup, I might be a head of a function or a director of a function. But if we're exponentially growing, it is unlikely that I, as the individual, some make it, but it's unlikely that all of those directors are going to be able to grow at the speed at which your organisation grows. And so sometimes we help organisations redesign, and actually they might put an exec team in, or a C-suite, or whatever else you want to call it, that organisation perhaps hasn't had before. And if you're not having really early conversations with people that says, we will continue to challenge you, to grow you, to develop you, But one of two things might happen in the future. One, you might have a leader put above you. That does not mean your role has become less significant to the organisation. In fact, it's probably grown in scope and influence as the organisation has. But you may not report to the CEO long term because that might not be the right thing. Yeah. Or you might continue to, you might control, I don't know, say maybe you had sales, but you become sales and marketing director. On LinkedIn, you're still a director, but your role is expanding and making sure that those early conversations are being had so there's no surprises.
I think that's really important because, you know, especially in a scale up, it's going to evolve and look so different in 2, 3, 4 years time. And skills might be different. The skills we need as an organisation might be different. So I think it's so important that individuals can understand, actually I'm part of an evolving piece. And for any of us, we remain really important to an organisation as the organisation remains important to us. But it's not finite, because nothing is it? Nothing's forever.
No, absolutely not. And I think that's I'm not sure we've answered the specific question because there's so many other pieces around it. But really, I think what we're saying is if you are a player manager, make sure you're getting the balance between doing the work and leading the work right. Make sure that you are using the other players on the pitch and working together to achieve that kind of collective responsibility. And if you are the ultimate manager of a team, actually making sure that they are really clear, that they are able to work well together, and that you've got the right players on the pitch. And if you haven't got all of those elements, what do you need to do to develop them? And if you can't develop them, what do you need to do next? And I would say probably neither of us have had anybody say, I replaced a member of the team too early.
No.
It's quite often the opposite, which is I probably knew about it for a while. And it was either hurting our customers or our team. And I didn't quite act decisively enough.
I think that's where people get that kind of human element
of course.
Kind of overtakes, doesn't it? Because we're all people, we all care about the people that we've worked with. To create psychological safety, you're giving so much of each other to each other to create that space. And actually it then transcends the transaction that happens at work. It actually becomes about, I care about the people I work with and wouldn't want to see any of them come to any harm. But of course, your responsibility to the organisation, particularly in a scale-up and founder organisation where to get where you want to get to, things have to change. I think keeping that conversation alive is really important.
It is, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, but I would probably go as far as to say it isn't kind to leave someone in a role that they're not doing well at, and that other people are all talking about then or observing they're not doing well at, or you see that it's causing them pain in some way, or they're working inordinately long hours to do something that shouldn't really take that long just to keep up. I think it is kinder to address that conversation. And actually, you know, in my career, I've had letters from people or met them at a later point and they were like, okay, that was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. I perhaps wouldn't have started the conversation myself, but I'm glad that you guys did. And then it's about, as you say, how do I go about doing that allows people to keep their head held high, and that we genuinely support them with finding another opportunity.
Yeah, it's really important, isn't it, for the fitness of the team. So I guess what's important then for that player manager is to really get to know their team, understand what you're dealing with right now, and think about what you're going to need in the future. So if you are interested and want to find out a bit more about that, then that's an area that Start Inspiring can help. So get in touch on the link below, and we can help you to make that assessment of your team. So how do you figure it out? You know, what am I good at? Is this what I want? Do I really want to be a leader or a manager? What would your advice be?
I think my advice would be a couple of bits. One, go and talk to other people that are doing it. Go and understand what the role really is. How do they spend their time? What do they find easy? What do they find harder? I think I would do a bit of an assessment on, if I wasn't just the player, I was the manager as well. What does being a good manager in this organisation mean? Many organisations would have a leadership framework or management framework of the behaviours and the actual tasks that you will need to carry out as a manager. Take a look at those. Think about which ones you feel comfortable with and think about which ones that you don't yet feel comfortable with, and then develop your own development plans. So do you need a coach? Do you need some management leadership development? Do you have a mentor in the organisation that you can work with that helps you to maybe shadow them or learn those skills? And then I think go practice. I mean, my advice would be go practice doing some of those things in a really soft way without necessarily taking the promotion. So what do I mean by that? Maybe taking notes in a disciplinary or a grievance hearing, or maybe sitting on someone's performance review, or maybe interviewing your own manager about how they set up for certain pieces of work that they do with their team. But take some personal responsibility. Go and find out.
And every organisation I work with, that is exactly what they're saying to me anyway, about we're always being asked for more learning, but actually we don't see a lot from people driving that for themselves. So it sort of feels a bit more like sparrows in a nest waiting to be fed.
Yes.
Rather than actually what every organisation needs. And actually what we need is that personal motivation and responsibility to carve this stuff out a bit for ourselves. The organisation will have to help, of course.
Yeah, of course.
But actually you can also do an awful lot yourself. Certainly, if I speak from experience, I did a lot of it myself.
I think there's that, and then there's don't be too scared to just try. I think that's the other thing. When managers are fairly new, so they've taken the role and they're fairly new, try. There's not too much. I mean, go and check with HR if there is a particularly contentious issue. But there's not too much you can do where it's irreversible.
Totally.
And that you can't put things right. Totally. And actually, if you have really good relationships with the people that you are the leader of, you probably get away with a little bit more anyway.
I think so too. I think another good thing to try is, if you're in that developmental space, you want to take on more responsibility but maybe haven't taken the role on yet, actually speak to your manager and say, what can I take? What can I take from you that's going to help you, but actually I can learn from?
Absolutely. There's nothing better than having people that want to do that.
It's amazing.